I'm George Balzelkov, and I'm here at the Apalachicola Maritime Museum, and I'm the lead shipwright on the Golden Ball restoration and renovation. I have another expert here with me, Mr. Brian Kennedy, that we'll introduce later on. And he actually is the large boat shipwright who has a lot of history in working on boats this size. The boat was built up in Pocasset, Massachusetts back in 1962 by a naval architect called L. Francis Herreshoff. Herreshoff comes from a family of renowned naval architects, including Nathaniel Herreshoff. And this boat was designed for a client down in southwest Florida, somewhere down in the Fort Myers, Sanibel, Sarasota area. The client wanted to use a boat in a shoal draft area, which means an area that doesn't have a great deal of sea depth. And so Herreshoff designed a boat that'll specifically be able to be sailing safely in shallower waters. So one of the things you'll see from the design are what, instead of a long and deep keel, this boat is unique in that it has what's called lee boards. And these lee boards hang from the boat and they act in place of the normal keel that you might see on a deep sea type of a vessel.
This is the old stem. We removed it because it's been patched several times and we wanted a more solid foundation. It was rotted at the base. As you see, it's a pretty rough old customer, but wanted to get the bones back in this boat before we start replanking. It'll take about 5 days to rebuild the stem.
We have pieces of wood that came from a tree from a local plantation up in Thomasville, Georgia, right over the border from Tallahassee. What we're looking at right here is a stack of live oak. Live oak are those large, magnificent trees that you see growing here on the Gulf Coast and on the east coast of Southeast America. You'll see them with the hanging moss, and they kind of represent the low country. One of the things about them is the fact they withstand seasons of hurricanes. So it's a very heavy, very dense, thick wood, but it's just very strong. It's perfect for this. With those hanging arms that you see and with the bends in the trees, we get a lot of great grain. We actually, in this case, want a lot of certain curves in our grain. And so we're able to actually look at a large piece of this wood and pick out particular curves to create our stems and to reduce the amount of what's called short grain, or which might be a weakness in certain areas that we're building with. What we did was we took a pattern of the stem that we need to replace in the boat, and we're able to put it up against this particular piece of oak. This particular piece of oak had a natural curve just the way we needed it for our stem. Once again, that reduces something called short grain, and so we have a natural, strong piece that we're able to get out of this piece of live oak like this.
This is our pattern we made from this old stem to cut this new stem. And that was cut out of that massive piece of live oak back there. So in order to get my rabbit in the new stem, I took our pattern and made station lines on this old stem. There's 12 station lines on here, drawn in a nice, convenient, flat spot. We measured over to the center line of the rabbit and sprung a batten through our marks down the center line of the rabbit and sawed out this center line pattern. We transferred all our station marks onto this stem and used our pattern from the center line of this old stem to determine the center line of this new stem. Now what we're going to do is take a bevel gauge and take our bevels at each station and spring a batten for the bearding line, which is the back side of the stem rabbit, which we've determined roughly by measuring and by the bevel gauge. Since this bevel is a rolling bevel and will change slightly from one end or the other to the stem. And then we'll chisel a pocket to this bevel at each station. Since I'm sawing to the least depth of the center line, and the planking increases in thickness as we approach the water line, the depth of the center line will have to be chiseled a little deeper but maintained. And there we got it. And now we're going to spring this batten through our marks and mark the bearding line. You like it?
Yeah, this is good.
What we'll do is we'll chisel down at each station to the center line.
Brian is carving out the stem. It's called chopping the rabbit.
That's getting pretty.
When you're cutting the stem, the process is taken off of the plans from the original designer, in this case, L. Francis Aeroshop. And the stem is the front part of the skeleton that the front parts of the planks attach to. Because the boat rolls and curves up along the stem and down along the stem, the angle at which the wood attaches to that stem changes. And so therefore, when a stem is cut, it's actually a combination of both art and science. You've got the geometry and the engineering of putting the planks in the right place at the right angle. But in order to do that, there's only so many lines you can draw. The rest of it really comes down to handwork and expertise using a hammer and a chisel.
This big boy is a socketed firmer chisel, and it's got the heft and the length to be able to pair this live oak, which is definitely one of the densest woods in temperate America.
When you see Brian working on this stem, he's using his eye and his hand to match up what the design drawings are supposed to be, but then he has to make that in place. This is not something that can be done with a table saw or some other kind of electronic tool. This is something that's strictly hand-eye work that actually comes more closer to a wood sculptor or a stone sculptor.
Well, that's 3 down, I got 9 to go. How about that?
Brian not only has the 9 pockets to finish on this side of the stem, but also must repeat the entire process on the stem's other side.
Well, I'm going to finish connecting these pockets till we've got a nice smooth flow. Yeah, it's pretty tough on your hands. Takes a pretty firm grip.
After 2 more days of precise, detailed work, the stem is finally complete.
Well, we've got the rabbit cut in both sides, and the scarf joint's finished. So you can see the other side. It's looking pretty good.
One of the beauties of the kind of work that we're doing with the stem is that we're taking something that is actually a piece of engineering and turning it also that there's an artistic aspect about it that's very enjoyable. I think it's one of the things that adds to the beauty of these boats.